Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Pro AV. Today, I'm your host, Ben Thomas. One of the questions that I hear all the time from our integration and end user community is, once I put a system up, an audio system, maybe a display system, what do I do from there? Can I stream my own Spotify? Can I just put DirecTV up on the screens? And the answer, 9 times out of 10, is absolutely not. That's very illegal, and it's not something that you can do in a commercial space. But for today's conversation, we're going to focus a little bit more on the audio and commercial use side, not only from the streaming and places like food and beverage, restaurants and places like that, but also just a little bit on the performance side and some of the things that the integration and technology installation side of the world needs to know as well. And to have that conversation, I brought on the best guest really that I could even think of, and that's somebody who helped found Beats Music, which is now Apple Music, and currently the CEO of a company called Soundtrac, your brand, and that's Ola Sars. Ola, thanks so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me, Ben. Pleasure.
Awesome. Well, Ola, before we really dig in super deep into the topic here, we'd love to give you a chance to talk a little bit about your experience. Obviously, you have a wealth of knowledge in the streaming world, but talk a little bit about that commercial side and how the Soundtrac, your brand opportunity became what it is now.
Sure. So as you said, I came from the consumer side of music streaming. I've been active in the digital music space for more than 15 years, and been part of the whole transition from the analog models and music distribution to what we have today, which is obviously streaming and access models that we're using all around the world right now. So the short story of me is that I was pioneering on the consumer side. I realized when working out of the US that there's this whole opportunity outside of consumers' headphones in the public domain. So in your local coffee shop, all the way to your conference center, hotels, everywhere music was playing. Actually, in 96% of US businesses, kind of consumer interfacing businesses, there's music being played in the background. And I realized there's a huge market here, what is referred to as background music. And I also realized that background music had not been digitized. It had not gone through the same transition as the consumer markets. And so I set up a company based on solving that problem for business owners around the world, giving them, the tools to play the right music at the right place at the right time in order to enhance the customer experience. And I set that company up with Spotify as my co-founder. Now we're live in 75 markets, but it's very early. I would say it's like 10 years behind the cycle of what's going on in the consumer industry. So this topic is new for everyone.
Well, Ola, I think our audience typically is familiar with a lot of the distribution technology, whether it's the speakers, whether it's the cabling, whether it's the infrastructure, and even the idea of creating, immersive experiences, whether it's using music to create ambiance, to create conversation, things like that. I think we have a pretty good grip on that. But a lot of times the question that we get is, why is it important for us to make sure that we license this music? Why is it important in general for companies to pay a fee or to license these to broadcast them in their place of business?
There's a couple of whys, right? And dependent on kind of what type of person you are. But my driving force is trying to kind of do the right thing here and help music creators at the end of the day, the songwriters or the artists around the world to actually make a living, just like the coffee shop owner is making a living of selling coffee. So should the songwriter in Austin be able to make money and make her, pay her bills. So when we use music in any type of context, it's important that we're actually doing that in terms of, fair trade and fair distribution of royalties for the usage of that music. That's why I get up in the morning to try to fix this actually somewhat dysfunctional market of B2B. And then the other one is obviously very practical, is there's legislation in place worldwide that space, using Spotify as an example or Apple Music in your business is the equivalent of opening a cinema with a Netflix account. So obviously you're not going to do that if you're running a professional business. So it's the same prerequisites. You need to pay a commercial license when you're using music to expand or augment your customer experience. And that's nothing that I have invented. That's been around since the 20s. The need to actually pay for commercial licensing when you're using music in the commercial space. And it comes with a pretty juicy liability should you not choose to follow the guiding principle. So there's this kind of a carrot and a stick in the equation, right? Helping the artist doing the right thing, responsible sourcing. And then the other one is, well, if you're helping a client and you're not, you're setting up all this, exclusive, cool hardware in place, and then you kind of miss the whole thing by using the wrong source and your client gets sued.
Ola, thanks for providing that level of understanding. And I think that especially understanding that you want to serve really both the artist side and the creative side, right? And protect both of those communities is so important. I think one of the questions naturally that comes up after that is, what sort of licensing do I have to get? And how do I go about getting that, right? Maybe I'm a venue right now, or maybe I'm a coffee shop that's in non-compliance. How do I go about getting those certifications and licenses?
Well, it depends a little bit on where you are in the world, but let's stick to the US for the context of this discussion, right? And I'm going to try to keep this on a basic level. There's a very long response, and I'll try to do the short response. So when you're playing music in the public domain, or in a physical environment, you need to cover mainly two dimensions of music licensing. One is the performance rights, the enablement of actually playing music and performing music in the physical domain, music coming out of the speakers, to simplify it. And then the second part that you need to cover is actually the source of the music. What are you playing music from? What is referred to in the music industry as reproduction or map? So the service. So Spotify could be the service, but you can't use that in the commercial domain. You can use it in headphones. In the commercial domain, there are services that you can use, like, for example, my company, Soundtrac, your brand, but there are other alternatives like Pandora for business, SiriusXM for business, and legacy. You can use CDs, you can play FM radio, but obviously business owners and installers obviously want to use the power of streaming as well, right? Because we've been trained as consumers. So there's a couple of options, but Soundtrac basically has the same catalog as Spotify has, but licensed for commercial use. And then for the performing rights, it depends on what type of business you're in. If you're a fitness provider, or if you're kind of a hotel or something. But in general terms, you can either source that through the service provider, where Soundtrac actually does cover performing rights from the 4 PROs in the US that are ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, and GMR, that represent the performing rights of the songwriters. Or you can go directly to any of those 4 PROs and get kind of the performing right licenses, which is also an option. But if you want to really simplify it, you're running, let's say, a hotel, you can get one of these services, Soundtrac as an example, and it will contain both the right licensing on the service level and the performing rights, and then you should be fully covered.
What's interesting that you talk about that performance side. A lot of these places, whether it be coffee shops or whether it be even large scale venues, right? A lot of them will stream both music, and then they will have live performances separately. Is there a separate license that folks have to cover that live performance? I know for churches, for example, houses of worship, there's a license called a CCLI license that helps cover a lot of those reproductions and live performances. Is it the same on the commercial licensing world as well?
Unfortunately not. This is where I'm really trying to keep it short and to the point here, but there's this very complex reality of playing music. It's actually way too complex than it has to be, in my humble opinion. So my job is trying to simplify for the business owner or for the church, or everyone wants to do the right thing, wants to play music. But unfortunately, no, you have to kind of check, depending on what type of business or what type of service that you're providing to your community. And then you got to check what type of licenses you have to have in place. But usually it's easy. You can just go online and you can go to CSAC or ASCAP and BMI, and you can kind of read up on it depending on what you're doing. But I can give you a general response. If you're doing any type of business within retail, any type of business within the broader sense, hospitality, meaning hotels, restaurant, bars, cafes, those licenses will be included in Soundtrac Your Brand subscription, both for the service and for the performing rights. When you start moving into fitness, as an example, gyms or classes, it becomes a bit more complex. And when you start moving into houses of worship and other types of use cases, then there's some additional complexity, unfortunately. But it's pretty easy to figure out if you take 10, 15 minutes and kind of Google around.
Well, and then you have the whole world of live broadcast and streaming as well. We won't dig in too deep to that because we want to focus more on the venue side of things today. But that's its own conversation altogether. But one of the things that kind of come up as I hear about these is you have nonprofit businesses and small businesses maybe that think, hey, I'm kind of exempt from this. I'm not doing tons and tons of business. Are there scales to certification and legal broadcasting of these tunes, or does it is it kind of a blanket thing where, hey, look, if you're operating a small little coffee shop on the corner, you've got to abide by all these too? Is there a scale to it, or is it really kind of just a blanket?
No, unfortunately, it's as complex for the small business owner with a cafe as it is for Starwood hotels. So that's the tough part about it, which I'm trying to help these entrepreneurs that are trying to make a living as well on their business and simplifying it. But I think we have come somewhat down the line of actually providing one service. You can buy it online. And when you buy Soundtrac Your Brand, then you get all the music, 120 million tracks, all the licensing for the master side of it. I mean, the reproduction, the actual access to the music files through streaming, as well as the performing rights, all in one for $35 or $50 per month, depending on what type of service that you're buying from us. So that covers you. But should you try to choose another way and kind of do direct deals with the PROs, then you have to do one with all four of them in order to cover it. And you have to also have a service that's licensed for commercial use, or playing a CD or radio, for example, which, by the way, the interesting part is that when we looked at the US market, we realized that 2/3 of small businesses in the US, and there's actually 3.8 million small businesses in the US, within kind of the broader segments that we're looking at, 2/3 are using consumer services without even knowing that it's illicit. And I totally understand, because of course you want to have all the music in the world at your fingertips. Of course you want to be able to playlist and kind of change the mood and access all this beautiful art. But there just hasn't been a service that was licensed to it. But now there is. So the easy answer is, if you go get one of these legit services where Soundtrac is included, you're all covered. Otherwise, you got to kind of go step by step by yourself and try to figure it out.
Well, you bring up a great point, and that is that the end user at the end of the day is the person that's liable for a lot of this, and the business owner. But one of the folks really who's in that typical line of installing the technology or providing advice is the integrator community, especially in the AV world, where you've got someone where they're your dealer, distributor, installer most times. So the integration community in the technology community has to be up to date on these as well. And talk a little bit about the importance of that community, especially when it comes to advising the end user business owner on best practices, not only for things like music streaming and music performance, but also being able to broadcast TV performances and shows. And we won't even get into the Super Bowl. That's its own world altogether. But how important is that integration and technology community to help advise the business owners?
I would say they're completely critical for having a functioning industry, because they're professionals. They're doing this 5 days a week or 6-7 days a week in reality. The cafe owner, she's not. She has no idea what music licensing is. She's trying to make a living, from her business. So I think being a professional partner and helping your clients understand both kind of the whole hardware setup and the audio visual setup that you would be looking to provide, in combination with the IP side, meaning the rights, in order to provide different types of content services, music, video, whatnot, that you're looking to do, is is part of the service solution or being a professional provider here, right? So I think the installer market is needing to become more and more sophisticated and becoming more and more kind of a professional partner here, helping the businesses to get the right hardware in combination with the right kind of services in order to drive their business at the end of the day, because that's what the entrepreneur is looking to do: sell more coffee, sell more t-shirts, or book more conferences. So it provides an opportunity as well, in my opinion. It's not just increased complexity. It provides an opportunity for the installation market to become more of a sophisticated service provider, and obviously charge more for services when you're also consulting in terms of different types of complexities of service layers. So if I was in that industry, and we're working with a lot of installer companies and kind of distributors that are viewing this as a huge opportunity, leaning in, learning, and adding services to their kind of portfolio of products, which provides them not only with kind of the one-off hardware sale, it also provides them with an opportunity to sell subscriptions and kind of recurring revenue, which opens up a new avenue for these service providers in terms of revenue stream.
Well, and sticking on that point, I love that you even mentioned, the integration dealer distributor community, bringing it into their portfolio as a service offering, right? Because it does a couple of things for them. It means that they don't have to be always up to date, right? They are allowing you guys to make sure that the certifications are always correct and compliant with the most recent laws. But you mentioned recurring revenue, right? It's a great way for that dealer, distributor, installer to continue to serve the end user and the business owner community in the long term. What are some of the ways that you're seeing, the installer and integrator community leverage a technology like Soundtrac, your brand, right now?
If you have this customer relationship and it's an existing customer or it's a new customer that you're bringing on, obviously you want to kind of solve the whole problem for the customer, right? Like providing both the installation and then what's coming through the hardware in order to provide the experience. So it provides an opportunity to become an advisor in terms of selection of services. It provides an opportunity to not only sell kind of like service packages, but also maybe curation of music over time. We see a lot of our service partners take the curation job and kind of become the curator as well as the service provider of the hardware platform for their customers, which provides another kind of incremental revenue opportunity, right? As well as just, being able to redistribute, in our case, Soundtrac, and making an affiliate fee or actually a reseller fee from us when selling through the right music service. And they're doing their customers a favor as well, seeing to it that they're correctly licensed and preventing them from any type of like legal matters moving forward, right? So it makes all the sense in the world for them to lean in, learn about this, and become a distributor of these types of services and make more money in the relationship with their customers.
Well, that's helpful insight, I know, not only for the installer and dealer distributor community, but really even the hardware manufacturers, right? Making technology that's easily integrated within services, right? It's something that we've seen across all sorts of different manufacturing technologies, not just the core Pro AV community, but something that we've seen across all sorts of different verticals. Last question, when you had a crystal ball in front of you and you wanted to see, hey, maybe in 5-10 years, this is what the industry would look like. Do you think it's going to continue to get more complex, or is it something that you think eventually will really settle out and we'll kind of get our sea legs when it comes to rights management?
I think we're in kind of a pivotal moment right now where it just seems a bit more complex than it actually is. So I think it's going to get better. That's my response. I think we're going to learn that customers, and we're already seeing it, they want streaming. They want the empowerment of all the music in the world at your fingertips, maybe even letting AI drive the selection of music depending on who's in the store and what's going on and what's trending in Austin right now and stuff like that. But in order to do so, you need to kind of solve the baseline of, okay, getting a proper licensed service in place first that provides the enablement of the music and in kind of synergy and connection to the hardware that's being installed. And when that's done, all the fun starts, right? Then you're like, okay, I'm licensed. I got a great setup. let's now do what we actually set out to do, using music to drive my business. Because like what we really want to get to is the point where we see bar owners, selling more beer because the music is great, or restaurant entrepreneurs having people stay for the drinks in their bar rather than going to the bar over the street. That's what we want to do. We want to give them the benefit of music as a tactical tool to drive their business. The actual setup and the complexity with a good installer, with a great partner, that will be done in a couple of days, and then they can start focusing on kind of the fun stuff, right? So I wouldn't over exaggerate the complexity, even though it being complex, but it's with a good partner and just getting it in place and kind of asking the right questions. You're going to be at the point of using music as you want to drive your business, rather than thinking about all this complexity around rights management.
Well, Ola, we appreciate your insight, especially coming from somebody who lives in that technology world. I appreciate really you giving those thoughts and really breaking down some of the complexities for us on rights management and playback in some of those commercial spaces. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
And thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe. Watch us again next time on Pro AV Today.